You were not expecting it. Maybe you were having one of those days where everything quietly piles up and then something small finally tips it over. You sat down. You let it out. And before the second tear had fallen, your dog was already there. Not because you called them. Not because they heard a sound they recognized as distress. They were simply there, pressed against you, head on your knee, eyes looking up at your face with something that did not look like confusion or curiosity. It looked like understanding. And most people in that moment think, they just know. They can feel it. But they never stop to ask the deeper question, what is actually happening inside your dog when you cry? What is their brain doing? What does the science say is really going on in that moment? Because the answer is not what most people expect. It is not instinct in the simple sense. It is not trained behavior. It is something that took thousands of years to develop, and it says something profound about the relationship between dogs and the humans who love them. Stay with us, because the last part of this video is the one that will genuinely stay with you. Before your dog ever reaches you when you cry, something has already happened that most owners are completely unaware of. Your body changed. Not just the tears. Not just the sound. Your entire physiological state shifted the moment your emotional distress began. Your breathing pattern altered. The tension in your muscles changed. Your heart rate adjusted. And your body chemistry, the hormones circulating through your system, produced a measurable change in the scent you release into the air around you. Your dog detected all of it. Before you reached for a tissue. Before the first sound escaped you. Possibly before you had even fully registered the feeling yourself. Research into canine scent detection has consistently demonstrated that dogs can identify human emotional states through smell alone, picking up on the chemical signatures of stress, fear, and sadness that the human body produces involuntarily. Their olfactory system is so sensitive that these changes, invisible and undetectable to another human in the same room, register clearly to your dog. So when your dog appears beside you in your worst moments with what feels like impossible speed, understand what actually happened. They did not guess. They did not get lucky. They read a signal your body was broadcasting before you even knew you were sending it. And they responded. Here is where the science becomes genuinely extraordinary. Researchers in the United Kingdom conducted a study examining how dogs responded to human crying versus humming. The sounds were matched for volume and tone. The only meaningful difference was the emotional content. Dogs were exposed to both while their behavioral responses were carefully recorded. What happened when the dogs heard crying was significant. The vast majority of them oriented toward the sound, moved toward the person producing it, and displayed physical behaviors consistent with what researchers described as emotional contagion, the same mechanism that causes humans to tear up when someone near them cries. But the detail that makes this finding remarkable is not simply that the dogs responded. It is how they responded. They did not approach out of curiosity. Dogs approach things they are curious about with a very specific behavioral signature: alert posture, head up, investigating. The dogs who heard crying approached with lowered body posture, soft eyes, slow movement. They approached the way a creature approaches something it wants to comfort, not to investigate, to be present with. That distinction between curiosity and comfort is everything. Your dog's response to your tears does not stop at what they hear and smell. It extends to something even more intimate. Studies into canine facial recognition have established that dogs process human faces in a specialized region of their brain, one dedicated specifically to reading the emotional content of human expression. When shown photographs of happy faces versus fearful or sad faces, dogs demonstrated measurably different neural responses. Their brains distinguished between human emotional states visually in the same way that human brains do. And they do something specific when they see a face in distress that no other animal has been documented doing with the same consistency. They look to the left side of the face first. This matters because the left side of a human face is controlled by the right hemisphere of the brain, the hemisphere that manages and expresses emotion most powerfully. Humans instinctively do the same thing when reading another person's emotional state. Dogs have independently developed the same perceptual strategy, specifically for reading human faces. When you are crying and your dog looks up at you, they are not looking at you the way they would look at another dog. They are reading you with a system their brain developed specifically to understand you. They're looking at the part of your face that carries the most emotional truth. They see more than you realize. Here is the part that stops people. A study published in the journal Learning and Behavior examined what dogs actually do when their owner is in distress. Owners were separated from their dogs by a door and instructed to either hum quietly or cry softly. The dogs on the other side could hear, but not see their person. The dogs whose owners were crying opened the door significantly faster than those whose owners were humming. Not just more often, faster. With what the researchers described as a sense of purposeful urgency. But the most remarkable data point was not the speed. It was what the dogs did after they got through the door. The dogs who reached a crying owner did not pace, did not seek their own comfort, did not engage in displacement behaviors. They went directly to the person. They made physical contact. They stayed. Researchers interpreted this as a goal-directed helping behavior, not random affection, not stress response, but a deliberate action oriented toward relieving the distress of another individual. The dog perceived that something was wrong with the person they were bonded to, and they took action to address it. This is the behavior researchers use the word empathy around. Carefully, provisionally, but they use it. This part is the one most owners have never considered. And it reframes everything. In the same study, the dogs who heard their owners crying but were unable to reach them, the ones who could not open the door in time, or who were separated by a barrier they could not pass, showed measurably elevated stress responses. Their cortisol rose. Their heart rate increased. Their behavioral indicators of distress were significant. They were not just responding to an unpleasant sound. They were distressed because someone they were bonded to was suffering and they could not reach them. Your dog does not simply observe your pain from a comfortable distance and respond out of habit or conditioning. Something in them is genuinely unsettled when you are hurting. Your distress produces distress in them, not as a mirror reaction, but as a specific response to the suffering of someone whose well-being matters to them biologically. The bond between a dog and the person they are attached to is not one-directional. It runs both ways through both nervous systems at the same time. Here is the final piece. And it is the one worth sitting with longest. Not every dog responds equally to every human in distress. Research consistently shows that the strongest responses, the fastest movement toward, the most sustained physical contact, the highest levels of apparent distress, when unable to help, occur specifically with the person the dog is most bonded to. A stranger crying produces a response. A familiar person crying produces a stronger one. But the person their nervous system has built itself around, the one whose scent anchors them, whose voice regulates them, whose presence their whole daily existence is organized around, that person crying produces something different entirely. It produces what can only be described as urgency, which means that when your dog appears beside you in your worst moments, they are not simply executing a general program of comfort behavior. They are responding to you specifically, to the particular person their biology has chosen to care about above all others. That is not training. That is not instinct in the mechanical sense. That is attachment, real, documented, measurable attachment, expressing itself in the most honest way available to a creature who has no other language. The next time you find yourself in one of those moments, sitting quietly with something heavy, not expecting company, and your dog appears and presses themselves against you, remember what is actually happening. They smelled the change in you before you felt it yourself. Their brain lit up with a response their species developed over 15,000 years of living alongside yours. They looked at your face with a perceptual system built specifically to read human emotion. They felt something that functioned enough like empathy that researchers reached carefully for that word. And they came to you not out of habit, not out of conditioning, but because something in them cannot remain comfortable when you are not. Your dog does not have words. They cannot ask what is wrong. They cannot promise it will be okay. But they can be there. Completely, quietly, entirely there. And somehow, they always know when that is exactly what you need. Subscribe to Raffalo because Remy will always show up. Paw prints.